Issues and Insiders. I'm Donna King, Editor-in-Chief of Carolina Journal. This time we are here with Brad Crone, President of Capital Connections. Now, you are still busy, super active in what's going on in North Carolina politics, but we're going to go back in time a little bit. Tell me about what happened with you and Lauch Faircloth, the late Lauch Faircloth, a huge influence in North Carolina politics back in 1983.
Well, I was working at WPTF. I was a street reporter covering Spot News.
Sure.
And he called and said, I'm going to run for governor. And he said, I need a driver. So will you come to work for me? So I went down and interviewed with him at the Department of Commerce, and he hired me. And the first day I showed up for work in Clinton in March of 1983, he got in the car, brand new Delta 88. And he said, there are 3 rules that I have when you're driving for me. I said, okay. He said, rule 1, I don't listen to the radio. Rule 2, I don't watch TV. And rule 3, you don't never, ever take a key out of one of my cars. I said, well, Mr. Faircloth, I got rule 1 and rule 2 down. I don't understand rule 3.
And you're the driver, right?
Right.
Yeah.
He said, Brad, I own 11 car dealerships. 1 stole is 1 sold. And you could go to his house at any given time, and he'd have a Ford product and a Cadillac product and probably a pickup truck, and the keys would be in the cup holder or underneath the floor mat. So just, truly amazing.
Yeah.
We did have a car stolen in the campaign at the Zaya Festival in 1984, and he got mad with me. And he said, I know how I'm getting back to Clinton. He said, you better figure out how you're getting back to Raleigh. So Rufus Edmonston allowed me to fly on his plane back to Raleigh to get back home. But we were traveling up to Spruce Pine, to Avery County, to campaign. It was August 22nd, 1983, Monday afternoon. We were flying in Ed Richards' plane, and Mr. Richards owned North Hills at the time, so it was a 414 Cessna twin-engine plane.
Okay.
And Leighton Elliott, very renowned, respected pilot here in town, was the pilot. Manuel Sowers was the co-pilot. And they flew in, Governor Hunt and Joe Grimsley had been in the plane just before we had took over the plane at 4 o'clock. So we left out of Raleigh-Durham at 4 o'clock, flew up to Marion. And we landed in Marion because Marion had operational runway lights. Okay. The Brad Reagan Airport over in Spruce Pine had pavement, but it only had a rotating beacon. So the runway lights were not operational. The runway in Marion was a grass strip. So we got to the airport in Marion, and Bobby Grindstaff meets us and Miss Green, who were campaign managers, and for us in McDowell and Yancey County. Got in her car, rode up to Spruce Pine, gave the speech, went to a hockey arena, ice arena there, and then drove back down the mountain. And during our trip up to Spruce Pine, it had rained in Marion on the eastern side of the mountain. So the grass was wet. So we arrive at the airport 10 o'clock at night, and the pilots were playing pinball. we're playing Pac-Man, to be truthful. And Faircloth later said he should have known he shouldn't have got in that plane when the pilots were playing Pac-Man. But we got in the plane, and Faircloth said, now, Leighton, he said, I don't mind spending the night in Marion. And Leighton said, Lauch, everything's going to be fine. It's good. We checked out the runway. Faircloth said, fine, let's go to Raleigh. So the pilot, I'm sitting cabin style. Pilot's here, empty seat, co-pilot, Mr. Faircloth, empty seat. Then there were 2 other seats in the back with a little refrigerator where you could carry food or soft drinks. And we get out to the end of the runway. So we started rolling. We rolled. Everyone in my family, my father and my 2 older brothers, were instrument-rated pilots. And we had a Bonanza down at the Johnston County Airport. And the Sunday before that Monday, we talked about that airport and that it's probably a dangerous airport to be flying out of at night. And we passed the tarmac, and we had not hit vertical rotation. We had not hit liftoff. Kept rolling. He was having a hard time getting airspeed, and Leighton hit a mud puddle. And mud came up on the windshield, and he immediately went from a visual takeoff to an instrument takeoff. But what had happened it turned the plane just a few degrees to the left. And Leighton literally pulled the plane off the ground, probably at about 95, 100 miles an hour. We started climbing out. Said, well, here we go, we're moving. And all of a sudden, the gear hit the top of a pine tree. And it pulled us down, and the nose cone hit a utility pole. And that sort of catapulted us, and we flipped 3 times along the tree canopy and then ended up in the middle of the lake, Lake James. Had fire, we were upright, thank the good Lord, but we had fire immediately coming up from the foot pedals. And Leighton Elliott announced, he said, everybody, we've crashed, everybody get out. It's like, no kidding, Leighton. Thank you for the information. I had my briefcase in the seat in front of me. Mr. Faircloth was dictating a letter to me to Governor Bob Scott. And so I was taking shorthand, and that's when we crashed. And I can remember I got thrown forward. Everybody sitting straight got thrown back. So I'm on the base of my seat watching fire coming up through my window, saying, well, here we go. So when we hit, I went to Faircloth's window because that's where the emergency exit was. Mr. Faircloth got up and went to the door. And he was fiddling, trying to get the top hatch open. I was trying to get the emergency hatch open, and I couldn't. I turned back around to him, and by this time, he got the top hatch. It opens up, and then it comes down. Steps come down. Well, he got the top hatch open, and he didn't jump out. I said, well, it's time to go. So he said, Brad, your big butt went through that little hole like one of the great Walindas. I used to tease him. I said, it wasn't any time for protocol. So I jumped out, and when I hit water, I said, I'm okay now because I can swim. Mr. Faircloth's a decent swimmer, but what happened to him, he got the steps, he kicked the steps down, and the back end of his tie got caught in some wreckage. So it noosed him. So he couldn't figure out why he was choking. And he walked down the steps, and by the time he walked down the steps, gas had gotten on the water. And so he got burned pretty good on his neck, on his arm, and on his back. So Leighton immediately went over to him, and they swam around clockwise. I swam counterclockwise to the shore that I could see. Manuel gets out, goes to the tail of the plane, and announces he can't swim. So I said, I'll come back and get you. And at this time, the plane got so heated that it blew up. It engulfed into flames. And so it was so hot he couldn't hold on to the tail anymore. So I swam over to him and said, here's what we're going to do. You hold your breath, you stick your arms out, you grab my arm, and we'll swim in together. And so that's what we did. We swam in back to the shoreline. And as we were walking back out to meet the Miss Green and Bobby Grindstaff, there was a reporter from WLOS, Channel 13, ABC affiliate out of Asheville that lived on top of the mountain. Mm-hmm. So here he is. We got a big TV light,
already there.
Right, a video camera strapped on, and at that time he had a big recorder too. Uh-huh. But you could see the TV light coming through the woods, and we were walking through the woods. He said, "Where's the crash?" And Mr. Faircloth said, "It's right down there." And he didn't even stop to ask who was it, if we were part of the party or not, because he thought for sure that nobody would have made it out.
Right.
So we got to the hospital, and we're just, flat lucky. Later in the campaign, Charlie Smith, working for Rufus Evanston, died at the Asheville airport in a plane crash. But people have always asked me over my 40 years in politics, why are you so loyal to Lauch Faircloth? Well, the man saved my life, so I'll always be loyal to him. Sure. We would not be here. He wouldn't, I wouldn't, Leighton Elliott and Manuel, all of them have passed now. Mm-hmm. But truly, it was a life-changing event for all of us. And the key thing, I was 21 years old. And the key thing that I learned out of it was mortality. And that was a really important lesson to learn. You usually don't learn it until, you're 60 and 70.
Sure.
So at 21, I learned tomorrow's not a given. And so I've approached my life that way for sure. But there's so many other, just great memories that I have of Faircloth. He taught me first day trip, we're driving from Clinton to Greensboro. He stopped in Chapel Hill and he bought me this book, The History of a Southern State by Professors Loeffler and Newsom. Got in the car and he said, every night we're on the road, he said, you're going to read a chapter in this book and then we're going over North Carolina history. So I tease people today, I say I got my master's degree in North Carolina history from Lauch Faircloth University. But at 21 years old, he taught me the value of, importance of understanding the state, the economy of the state. So from Wanchese and Manio all the way back to the Jim Hunt second term, I got a pretty good idea of the history of our state. And it's been invaluable to me, whether I was a journalist, whether I was in newspaper publishing, or the 32 years that I've worked as a political consultant.
Sure.
Another amazing thing about him, his father had a stroke when he was 18 years old. He was a freshman at High Point College, High Point University now. He had to come back home and run the family farm. And so he made a promise to his father that he'd read a book a week and that he would self-educate himself. And so he challenged me to do that, and I still do that to this day, just absorbing information as much as you can. It was always. And then he was just a practical joker too. He had a dry wit that is probably, I have not seen it in another politician that I've worked for in 40 years of politics. Paul Tsongas probably could match him in that regards. But he would, Friday afternoons, he'd call all the staff together about 4 o'clock, 4:30. And Long Branch was the big bar in Raleigh out on Wake Forest Road.
Sure.
And he'd say, now folks, he said, if you're going to the Long Branch and getting liquored up tonight, he said, if you get arrested by Raleigh PD, you tell them you're working for Rufus. So just, little things like that you remember that were so precious. His ability to understand people and relate to people. I dare say that there are many politicians in the state who could run a pan or a motor grader and an excavator. We were in Stanley County in Albemarle one day, and he said, stop. And he stopped right now. I said, okay, what's the problem? We were out in the middle of nowhere in the country in a big old cow pasture to my right. He said, I want to see how this man builds a pond. And so just little things like that really, gave me insight to who he was as a person.
Right.
Very, very caring.
What do you think his legacy is for North Carolina? He really is a larger-than-life person for folks who are now working in journalism or in public politics and public policy in North Carolina.
I think most importantly, the biggest mark that Faircloth made on the state is twofold. One, our highway infrastructure, on building the skeleton that is the modern road system that we have today. And then two, he really opened up the state economically as our Commerce Secretary and developed new industries and supportive industries of elevating the mission of the Research Triangle Park, elevating the banking mission, working with the key bankers in Charlotte, Mr. McCall in particular. They were friends, and then really elevating agribusiness. He led an effort to modernize key commodities, in particular the poultry industry and the pork swine industry in the state. So his impact on our economic status, not only in the 70s and 80s, but even today, is a testament to his work. Very different, it's an end of an era,
Sure.
an institution. You don't have many more political icons like him. Jesse Helms, Lauch Faircloth, Thad Ure,
Right.
Rufus Edmonston, and Jim Hunt and Jim Holshouser. Faircloth would not be, I would not say Mr. Faircloth was a great political ally of Jim Hunt, but he respected the way Jim Hunt worked. He always used to say that Jim Hunt was governor from sunup to midnight, and that you had to get up mighty early in the morning to outfox Jim Hunt. And that was true. Another great thing, we were running, and at that point in time, the Republican Party in the state was really in its infancy. You had Jim Holshouser and Jesse Helms.
Right.
Helms representing the conservatives, Holshouser representing sort of the Chamber of Commerce crowd.
Sure.
But there really wasn't a big Republican Party.
Right.
And so the fight within the Democrats was always, you had the conservative wing of the Democratic Party and the liberal wing of the Democratic Party.
Right.
Well, Jimmy Green was the conservative candidate at the time, lieutenant governor. He got indicted and he got acquitted. And I'll never forget the day he got acquitted. We were listening to WPTF, listening to the trial, and Faircloth turned to me. He said, "I've lost this election," because he knew a divided conservative vote coming out of the Democratic primary would be a problem for him. And he'd always used to say, he said, "You can never underestimate Jimmy Green." So
Sure.
he, just his insight
Right.
into people and being able to read people was something we don't see in politics today.
No.
And another thing, he respected Senator Helms a lot, in the sense that Helms worked as hard as Jim Hunt worked. Helms built an organization. Helms communicated and got out and met and talked with the voters. And Faircloth always totally respected that.
That relationship between Democrats and Republicans, regardless of where they are, do you think we still have that? I feel like it's a little bit more divided than it
It's
used to be.
way more divided, way more divided.
Right.
And, that saddens me a great deal,
Sure.
because I have good Republican friends.
Yeah.
I grew up in the conservative wing of the Democratic Party, and we don't exist anymore. I'm a Jim Hunt Democrat, a fiscal conservative, social liberal, and have always been able to respect. I got to know Tom Fetzer. I've known Carter Wren forever, Andy Yates, Charles Hellwig.
Sure.
All, really icons. Dee Stewart, when Dee came to town, I helped Dee get his books established, the business side
Sure.
of his business. So, at the end of the day, politics is politics, but I want to be your friend too.
Sure.
And I think that's really important. And we're missing that in politics today, because people want to get on Facebook and bless you out, or on X and bless you out. And I don't think that builds a better state.
Right.
And it really does concern me.
Sure. So what's anything we want to make sure that he's remembered for? We talked a little bit about his legacy, but also his influence on the culture of politics. That seems to be an important part of the role he had.
Totally. And his ability to reach across the aisle. And I think his ability to understand the core issues of our state and have a vision to help move us forward.
Sure.
He was a good senator. I think he would have been a truly great governor. He didn't get that choice and that chance, but his legacy and his mark will be long and deep in the history of our southern state.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate all your time and coming in to see us.
Thank you. Enjoy.
All right. Thank you.